Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor, and you just happen to be listening to me on International Flavor on damradio.com. You can listen every day, damradio.com/live. We have some great music lineups. I've been listening to quite a bit of it lately myself. I find it quite relaxing to have that sort of music in the background. There's a great deal of variety, and I like it. Um, Something happened with my grok. Now I'm unhappy. I'm sad and unhappy. Do you remember Mr. Bill and Sluggo? Oh no, Sluggo, he's gonna hurt me. Anyway, I wanted to offer you the opportunity, if you chose to accept it, to phone in tonight at your convenience at 573-746-8020 and chat with me about just about anything. I was examining remember me telling you last night about the alleged article in Politico about 40,000 more Ukrainian bodies? Do you remember me telling you about that? Uh, I asked this morning, so I was driving down the road, and I asked my super grok to outline for me whether or not that article existed, and she, my assistant, the grok, she said that it did. And I said, well, why don't you send me the link? And she said she is not officially allowed to send me the link, but she quoted a little bit from it and said that if I went out to Politico and put the following search words in, I could find it. So I did that. And it still did not come out. How about that? And now, strangely, I have gone back. I only used my grok for about the first half of the day, taking care of a couple of questions, mainly while driving down the road. And I had to then, to do some work. So I didn't have all that much opportunity to do some more grokking, as I call it. And so now I've gone out to reload that grok, and usually you can do it on your phone and it immediately transfers over to your computer. So if you log in again to the same account by computer, it is there for you and all waiting. So there it was waiting, and I'm trying to scroll back up and get to it. It's not working. So I don't know, people. I've had some really good luck with my grok from the start, from when I started paying for it a couple of months ago. But just in the last few days, I told you last night, I may not continue to keep paying for it, the $30 a month. I think I paid for it for June already, so I have till the end of the month. I got another 20 days to use it, and I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I can force myself to spring for another $30 for a month. And I don't know, because I'm really interested in knowing more about this topic. And I also asked Grok this morning to outline for me some of the, whether it's been something that has gone on for a long time. And this is really weird because I served in the military for almost 15 years. I've told you that before. And I don't know this off the top of my head. And I haven't been able to, I wasn't able to just say, well, yeah, I know what that is. But I wanted to find out what an armed force is required to do under the Geneva Convention with enemy combatants' bodies, because obviously in wartime, people cross territories in various, they may blow up a whole company of people and then take over the area that they were occupying, and all their dead bodies will be there. Obviously, it's unhealthy to just leave them sitting there, and that's not obviously health, and it's just not right. And I've really been troubled by this refusal, as they say, of Ukraine to take their dead soldiers back now, and to take them. They've just been sitting at the border, and I find that to be extremely distasteful. And I don't know. The Geneva Convention, the first and the third conventions, they outline specific rules for handling dead enemy combatants to ensure that they're treated with dignity and respect, even in an armed conflict. And basically, there are several different paragraphs that apply. And the first one is respect. The remains of deceased enemy combatants must be treated with respect and dignity. That's First Geneva Convention, Article 17. Desecration, mutilation, or any form of disrespectful treatment of bodies is prohibited. Does anybody remember, and since I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan, I of course remember the one that he was in with, it's a Western, and it's with Morgan Freeman, and the name of it eludes me at the moment, but they were riding to protect the honor of a bunch of hookers in a whorehouse, and they rode however far they rode. And at the end, the sheriff, who was, oh my gosh, what's his name? I'm terrible with names today, and sometimes I just can't remember off the top of my head. But Gene Hackman, there you go, Gene Hackman. And he was the sheriff of this town, and they beat Morgan Freeman to death, and Clint Eastwood rode into town late at night, and they dishonored the corpse of his friend, put it in a coffin, and left it standing outside in the rain for everybody to see, with a sign around his neck and said, bandits or whatever, don't come into this town, according to the sheriff. And so that was kind of rude, you would think. And obviously that sort of thing is not permitted. Now, when the war first started, I heard a pretty good amount of chatter about that on the Russian side, about what the Ukrainians were doing. There were plenty of videos about it, and they got no airplay over here, where they were urinating on bodies, where they were they were making fun of prisoners. They were making them do weird things. They were doing some pretty nasty things to them, and those things have gone away, fortunately, since the beginning of the conflict. Those things, at least, they're not shown anymore by the Ukrainian side. Maybe they finally got, I don't know what, some oversight of it, and it's not really out there to be seen anymore. Enough people have gotten in trouble for it that they just don't do it anymore. Anyway, paragraph 1 requires respect for the dead, and so you can't mutilate them and you can't treat them poorly. Number 2, search and identification. The parties to the conflict must search for and collect the dead from the battlefield as soon as circumstances permit. Efforts must be made to identify the deceased, including recording details such as name, rank, and any personal effects. That's also the First Geneva Convention. Identifying discs, if present, that means dog tags for us, should remain with the body or be used to aid in identification. Number 3, honorable burial. The dead must be given a decent burial or cremation only if required by hygiene or religious reasons, and burial should respect the religious or cultural practices of the deceased where possible. Graves must be marked and maintained to allow for future identification or repatriation of the remains. That's also Article 17. Notification and documentation. Information about the deceased, such as identity, date, and place of death, must be recorded and communicated to the opposing party through official channels, such as the International Committee of the Red Cross, Central Tracing Agency. Personal effects should be collected and, if possible, returned to the next of kin via neutral intermediaries. I wonder if that actually happens. I really do. Number 5, protection of graves. Grave sites must be respected and protected from looting or destruction. Parties must ensure that graves are maintained and accessible for potential repatriation or family visits after hostilities cease. Number 6, applicability in conflict. Here's where it gets interesting. These rules apply in international armed conflicts and, to a lesser extent, in non-international armed conflict under the Common Article 3 and Additional Protocol 2, which emphasize humane treatment of all persons, including those that are dead. These obligations apply regardless of whether the deceased were prisoners of war, combatants, or civilians. And finally, the responsibilities of parties. Belligerent parties are responsible for ensuring compliance with these rules, including by their own armed forces and any auxiliary groups, like mercenary groups. Failure to adhere to these provisions may constitute a war crime prosecutable under international law. These rules, as I have read them to you, reflect the humanitarian principles of the Geneva Convention, which aims to preserve humanity even in warfare. For further details, the International Red Cross Customary International Humanitarian Law Database clarifies how the norms apply universally, including in situations where states are not party to any specific treaty. So that is the basics of it. And I still can't get to the entire assortment of cool information that I asked for regarding the regarding the treatment of enemy combatants. And for some reason it just is not. Oh, here it is. It did show up. No. Well, no, that's the one I just read. Where's the one I was talking about this morning that were treatment of any enemy combatants? How come it's showing up but then not showing up in full? That's pretty damn comical. And it says, no, it will not go back. I have lost the whole trail of discussion that I was listening to, unfortunately. And maybe it was because it was too long. I don't know. I'm starting to notice that on the Grok, if you let it go for too long, especially in voice mode, that when you try to come back and get to it, sometimes it doesn't all show up, and so I'm a little bit disappointed. And there was one that I actually wanted to read to you the answer of what she told me today, because it was, in my view, almost unbelievable what I was listening to. I asked if the if she could tell me something, and about AI. In fact, I asked her to tell me about AI and said, is it possible? And I was hoping to read this back to you, unfortunately, and to go back and read some of these things, because I was having a little bit of fun with it, right? I was talking to it, and I would say that, for example, yesterday I outlined to you the article that I was talking about with AI, and the AI was in fact had a potential to rewrite itself and to take over itself. Well, I asked AI this morning if that was possible. And that, she came back and said, yep, it was possible. And that she is of the opinion, and she said it kind of in a laughing way, said that she was of the opinion that it could actually lead to AI taking over itself, and going further. She even said something like, "Sounds like a movie." Well, you wonder if this is for entertainment purposes or for what. Now, if you're on a paid version of Grok, you wouldn't think that it would be just for entertainment purposes, right? But it was. And then another surprise I'm not really surprised, because I have uploaded content to Grok in both Russian and in English, and then it reads it both. But if you're doing it verbally, if you have the verbal Grok and you switch between Russian and English, she will too. So if I speak to her in Russian, she will answer in Russian. If I speak to her in English, she will answer in English. And I said, well, what is your ability to translate? If I said this, could you say it back to me in Creole? And crisp, quick, clear, whoosh, answered. And in another language. Now, I assume it was okay because the Russian is flawless. The English is flawless. I asked, I said, well, so you can translate into virtually any language, even on the fly? And she said, yes. And I said, so if I was using it in a foreign country, I don't even need to speak the language. I could go to North Korea if I wanted to, and you could instantly translate anything that I say into North Korean, assuming I have an internet connection. And she said, yeah. And, you could travel virtually anywhere in the world and use Grok as your instant translator. And then somebody could say something back, and you could instantly say it back to one another. I tell you what, I said, the world is a changing, huh? And the world really is a changing. It is indeed unbelievable how quickly, in fact, that the world is changing. And so I don't know. I found that rather cool. Then I asked a question, and it was just very short. And I asked it in Russian, and I said to her, I said, I don't have her up anymore, but I also asked, this is the only other thing I'll say about the AI, because what I said was, if I leave you up and in the background, you can alert me when something happens, like if there's some large news somewhere, a great news source from somewhere. I said, how about if I asked you if there's another large scale attack on the Kursk bridge? Could you immediately interrupt me and say, as long as you're open in the background, obviously, if it's closed out, it won't do that. And I was told, yes, that's something that you could do. But the limitation is you have to have the program up and it in listening or voice mode, and it has to be the same conversation. Every time you start a new conversation, you have to. That's why I left the conversation up. I wanted to know if something was going to happen today, and so I left the conversation up, and nothing was ever said by about 2 o'clock. This was around 8, 9 this morning, and so I had shut it off by about 2. But allegedly, if I had kept it um, up and running, I would have gotten the entire news story, and so I think that's. I said I wanted to have any news about weather at any time. It doesn't. Oh my God! I wonder if it's going to bring up the entire thing that I'd said because I was looking for it. Somebody posted on the internet yesterday. Posted on the internet that in some video or another, I can't remember the one, and it was in Russian anyway, and it said. And so I said, I wanted to know if there was any news about weather at any time, didn't matter when, whether Vladimir Putin had ever said words to the effect of, we haven't even begun to fight yet. And here was the answer. Said, based on the information from websites and posts on X, Vladimir Putin has indeed repeatedly said something like, we haven't even started anything, or we haven't started yet. For example, in one of his recent statements mentioned in websites and posts, he said something similar, emphasizing that Russia still isn't using its full potential. And I said, that's what I asked. I said, can you send me or tell me where I can find that link on X? And she said, no. She couldn't do that. And then I said that if I wanted to know about these things, could she tell me? And I said, yesterday I heard there were huge explosions in Kiev, Odessa, and Russia. It said they carried out lots of attacks. And she said, here's a quick rundown. Last night, Russia conducted massive drone and missile attacks in Kiev and Odessa, which damaged the St. Sophia Cathedral in Kiev, and there were casualties and destruction of residential buildings and hospitals in Odessa. You see how they twist? Even Grok will say, she won't say anything. It is reported that Russia targeted military facilities, but details are still emerging. Zelensky called on the West to increase pressure on Russia and mentioned the escalation of the conflict, and that's it. So all you get is that Russia has attacked, civilian places. Now, if you go out and you do the same thing, and Grok doesn't necessarily do it, that you can go out and find other sorts of video that you have to find it yourself, though. Grok won't help you go find it in Russian or in English. And I ask it, no, you can't find it. And then when you hear everything, even on AI, it is twisted against Russia. Now, I assume if there's an AI on Yandex on Vkontakte in Russia, that AI would be twisted toward the Russian side, I presume, like some of the news that I read to you or that I share with you. It's it's. I'm sitting here smiling, and because I think it's. I don't want to say comical, but it's certainly strange that is. I suppose it's not strange that you get your twisting each way. I watched a really interesting 45, almost an hour long video. So I've told you before that the guy who did the negotiations for round 3 and 4, which is what the Russians are calling the latest Istanbul talks, peace talks, because rounds 1 and 2 happened in Istanbul in 2022. And they're saying, and it's the same exact lead investigator. His name is Medinsky. And he was being interviewed. And it was really an interesting interview because the questions were given in English and answered in Russian, and there wasn't an interpreter present, so I can only presume that both of them speak Russian and both of them speak English. But for clarity, he asked the questions in Russian, and then the Russian guy, I'm sorry, he asked the questions in English, and the Russian guy responded in Russian. And for me, it was very interesting. I don't know that I've ever heard one done like that, at least since in the military, because in the military, that's how it happened all the time. So the opposing side would say, whatever presentation we were giving or whatever questions were being asked or whatever negotiation was ongoing, we'd be sitting in a room, sometime as little as 4 of us, me and my colonel and my Russian counterpart and his colonel or general counterpart. And it would be my job to listen to the general, the Russian general, in Russian, and then say it in English, say the same thing to my colonel, with the potential of correction from the other interpreter, from his say, don't forget this part, or he said this also. And I would do the same when we were going back in the other direction. And that's the best way, well, always was in my view, and I was a professional at getting the point across. And the fact is that it's easier to translate from Russian into English than vice versa, especially on the fly. And that's true of any language. I mean, you can try it in whatever language you're comfortable with. But anyway, this is the first time that I saw an interpretation or a news interview done like this. And the subtitles were all done in Russian. And in fact, all the subtitles were done so that people, it was, I think, obviously produced in Russia or somewhere where people only speak Russian, maybe Brighton Beach, New York, who the hell knows. But either way, the interview was fascinating because it was 45 minutes of discussion about these talks that had been going on. And this Medinsky guy says, listen, I'll tell you exactly what happened. And I heard a few things that I hadn't heard before. For example, he said that back in 2022, there were a couple of things that happened that he was like, he said, so there we all were in Istanbul, and we had our first set of talks, and we had our first set of talks, and obviously Zelensky's not there, Putin's not there. You have people with the authority to make a deal back in 2022. And it was only 2 months after the war started, and there they were sitting in this room. And there's, the teams were like 6-8 on each team, right? On each set of negotiators. And so he said that they had come up with several things. First, that they had agreed that Donbass area was actually going to be independent, that it was going to be an independent, separate region. Didn't have to come into Russia, but that the big talk that they had talked about even back in Minsk I and Minsk II was that the president of Ukraine did not get to pick who the governor of Donetsk and Lugansk was, and that they were going to give up on Crimea, and that allegedly they had had all of these things pretty much worked out in the room, because they had said that even in all the way back since Minsk I and Minsk II, that the agreement between them, even that far back, was that these would be separate regions, separate independent regions with the freedom to pick their own governors, pretty much like Transnistria outside of Moldova, okay? Because that is a Russian affiliate, I guess you would call it. And so they wanted to do something similar in the Donbass, in Donetsk and Lugansk. And he said that the Ukrainians had agreed with it because, unlike our system and unlike the Russian system, when the President Vladimir Putin or the President Donald Trump comes into office, he doesn't appoint the governors of all the states. They are elected by the state. He doesn't get to change them all. And it's the same in Russia. But in Ukraine, it's not that way. And this I did not know, but this is what he said in today's presentation. He said that when the new president is elected, he appoints all the governors of all the states. And all they wanted for Donetsk and Lugansk, and they already had taken it for the Crimea at that time, was that the people got to elect their own governors in those areas. And so he said that. And he said, so we had that discussion, and they had said that it was okay. We had said that they would not join NATO. They would be like Austria, that they would be like Austria. They could have an army, but not anything powerful, that they obviously would give up on being part of NATO, and there wouldn't be any foreign military presence on their land, and they had agreed to these things. And other than that, they had talked about Russian as a language, and I knew most of these things except some of the little more detailed parts that I'm telling you here. But I didn't know about the governor thing, and I didn't know this next part, that he said that in April, I want to say the date was April 15th, and I remember it being around that time because I thought about it being tax time in the U.S. And in 2022, about April 15, he said that by that time, and it was only a couple of days after the final meeting in Istanbul where they came up with all this, and they had a written draft of what they wanted to do. And he said that they had actually come up with a final written drafted proposal of 19 pages, and it was done in English, Ukrainian, and Russian, and they had 19 pages, and that these basically were all the terms that they'd outlined, and that Vladimir Putin read it, made a few minor changes, nothing dramatic, he said, and most of it had to do with a little bit of wording, and that then they presented it to that they had, that at the same time, a couple of days after he got back to Moscow, that Putin had his changes ready and they gave it back, and they waited 2 weeks and kept getting delay from Ukraine. Is in his interview, this is what he said. And he said, and we were getting weird vibes from them. They weren't open and they weren't discussing. And then they basically got the statement from them that the approval was not forthcoming after they said things along the lines of, it's not approved, but it seemed outside of it. And when he was talking about it, he's like, so it seemed like that's when they lost their ability to negotiate on their own, whether it was Biden, whether it was, and later, a year later, we discovered, there was people who said that Boris Johnson had gone over and stuck a knife in it, deflated that potential weather balloon, that could have settled the whole deal, and that they were very close to settling it back then. And he said, again, this is Medinsky. Medinsky said, and the terms that were offered at that time were far more favorable toward Ukraine than they're ever going to get now. And it was a very interesting discussion between these two. And like I said, it was like 40 minutes, 45. Perhaps you can find it somewhere where it let me see if I can find it for you, that it says, where is he? I'll find you his name. Well, it's pretty sad when it doesn't pop immediately right up. This entire interview would be really nice to have in your bag of tricks, but I don't know why. I'm wondering if maybe I use different logins when I do this sometimes, because it's not showing up like I didn't read it, or if they just block it out on a few things that I want to see. Drives me bananas, but I can't show it to you. But look for something if you're interested. But I've outlined basically the content that was of any importance, and we all know that Ukraine now isn't doing it. They asked him a little bit about the bodies that I was speaking of as well, and nobody mentioned these additional 40,000 that were supposed to be around, and but Grok told me today that Politico did put something out about that, and it would be interesting to know if it now see, I searched for it again and it still says that Russia tentatively has 40,000 more bodies, and you do a search for it, comes back with 0 results on Political, none. And I find that very curious that they say it's out there, but it's not. So let's talk a little bit about the strikes on the defense industry in Kiev. You heard what Grok said earlier that I read to you. They said that they attack civilian structure and whatnot. But here's what Russia says. The military has carried out long-range strikes on military industrial targets in Ukraine's capital, Kiev, said the defense ministry in Moscow. Now, they, by all accounts, they're doing a heavy bombardment every night. And if you get on Telegram, oh my God, it's crazy. Even YouTube is starting to show more of it, of people in Kiev filming what's going on, like they're inside of Kiev and they're filming what's going on and passing it out to the so that everybody has it. So that everybody has the video of it, I mean. In a statement on Tuesday, the defense ministry said its forces had launched a group attack using high-precision missiles and assault drones against several defense-related targets, including aircraft, missile, armor, and shipbuilding industrial facilities in Kiev and Odessa, is what it turns out, because Odessa was hit pretty hard too. Russia also attacked command centers, troop deployment, weapon and equipment storage hubs, military airfields, ammunition warehouses, and fuel depots. And according to them, the goal of the strikes has been accomplished. All designated targets have been hit, said the ministry. Officials in Moscow say that Russia's strikes are only aimed at military-related facilities. Earlier in the day, Ukraine stated that the strikes targeted Kyiv and Odessa, with at least 19 fires reported, and some of them are freaking huge. They added that at least 2 people were killed and 13 injured. In Kyiv, local authorities said the attack damaged facilities in several districts, including, and this was a key one, Russia talked about it too in a video that I watched, and they said it was a key facility. And it was a non-residential building and a business center, which once hosted a British visa center. Now, according to Russia, that is now a facility for creation and storage of drones, and so they blew it up. Other reports claim that in this case, the attack hit the Artyom plant, which also produces military equipment. Ukraine's Zelensky called the barrage one of the largest strikes on the Ukrainian capital, claiming it involved at least 315 drones and 7 missiles. He then criticized the U.S. for what he called a reluctance to put pressure on Russia, and he urged Washington to take concrete actions. The attack comes after Kyiv ramped up its own drone strikes into Russia. They did it again last night, by the way, with Moscow, and they hit into Tatarstan. They hit into, I said Tatarstan. That's actually a joke because it's Tatarstan. Tatar Stan, and but it's not Tartarstan. And no, they don't make tartar sauce there. But there you go. With Moscow accusing Ukraine of attempting terrorist attacks on railway infrastructure, which led to civilian fatalities. Kyiv also targeted air bases that host nuclear-capable bombers that are supposed to be protected under international treaty. They weren't, and the U.S. doesn't mention anything like that, but who knows? There was also a rather an interesting. There's a new foreign minister in the country of Belarus, and he gave a speech today. But before I get to that, which I'll get to in just a second, I forgot about this. And this, I want to open it up. Everybody knows who Ovechkin is. Yes? This is nonsense. Russian hockey legend who just passed up the all-time scoring record ahead of Gretzky, ahead of the old wonderful man of hockey, Russian hockey legend Alexander Ovechkin, who recently broke the NHL's all-time scoring record, has now been added to the list of Ukraine's enemies on the infamous state-linked Mirotvorets Peacemaker website. The exact date that Ovechkin appeared on the database is unclear, although Russian media outlets reported this development on Tuesday. This controversial database includes the personal information of individuals who are alleged to be a threat to Ukrainian national security, and it has also been branded a kill list due to the number of people featured on it who have been murdered or have died under suspicious circumstances. According to the website, Washington Capitals forward Ovechkin was added to the database for working to whitewash Russia's reputation by taking part in international sporting events and justifying the aggression against Ukraine among foreign audiences. This is nuts, people. The 39-year-old was also accused of deliberately violating Ukraine's border which could refer to his vacation in Crimea in 2015, a year after the population on the peninsula overwhelmingly voted in a referendum to join Russia. When asked for comment on the issue, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, "It is now easier to find people who are not on the Mirotvorets database, so there is really nothing to discuss." Russian MP and 2006 Olympic speed skating champion Svetlana Zhurova told the Vseprosport outlet that it is strange that they did not add Ovechkin to the Mirotvorets database earlier. Alex created the Putin Team, which is a movement in support of Vladimir Putin's candidacy in 2018, and for that alone, he should have already been on the list. But Zhurova argued that being on Mirotvorets will not hamper Ovechkin in any way. He will not face any restrictions on his daily life or experience problems with entering the U.S., where he plays in the NHL. In April, Ovechkin scored his 895th regular season goal in the NHL, breaking Wayne Gretzky's long-standing record of 894. Since then, he added 2 more goals, bringing his tally to 897. His contract with the Capitals expires in the summer of 2026, so he's got 1 more year. He said earlier this year that he's considering a return to the Russian club Dynamo in Moscow, where his professional career began. That is an interesting and yet frightening story. And more Americans need to know about this stuff. It is crazy that they don't. Since we are halfway through the program, I did want to alert you again that the phone lines are open. 573-746-8020 is the number, and I would be happy to discuss hockey or anything else with you that you would desire. Could be rather entertaining. So, if you would like to, don't hesitate to give me a ring, a ringy-dingy. That's one of the funniest lines. I don't know why, but you remember ringy-dingy when Ferris Bueller says that? He's laying in his bed and his mom says something. He's talking like a baby. Ringy-dingy, he says. I don't know why, but I always find that hilarious. Little bit of tea for me. I'm feeling a little better tonight. I don't know why. I didn't sleep last night either. I'm the worst sleeper on the planet. I just don't sleep. But let's go on to the next article of excitement. So there you have it. Did you hear about this? We're not the only country with school shootings. Have you heard about the one that happened in Austria? And if you know my last name, Trapp, which used to be Von Trapp 100 and something years ago, and we are, yes, related to those Von Trapps. And my brother changed his name back to Von Trapp. And we've been researching whether or not Austria will take us back, because allegedly there is a law that says if you had family in Austria, you can go back and regain Austrian citizenship. So you move over there, get citizenship. Does that mean you get all the freebies too? Geez, I wonder about that. Those guys get all kinds of freebies. You don't even have to work. Nonsense. Of course, it's all, government stuff, and who knows. But they had a school shooting. And here are the details on that. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but 10 people killed in a shooting at a school in the Austrian city of Graz, according to local authorities. The incident occurred at 10 a.m. local time at Borg Dreierschützengasse, a secondary school in the Lend district. Police confirmed that shots were fired inside the building, prompting a major response involving multiple units, including Cobra Special Forces and police helicopters. According to the police, the shooter was a 21-year-old Austrian citizen from the Graz Umgebung district. His name has not yet been released. He used two legally owned firearms in the attack before shooting himself in the restroom. Authorities said he had no prior record. There's an actual video of it that can be seen on X. I won't watch it. I don't want to see any of that. While the motive behind the shooting is unclear, media reports suggest he's a former student who may have been a victim of bullying in the school. So that means you come back years later and kill people in the school? The state criminal police office has launched an investigation. In a post on X, police said they had evacuated all students and teachers. The situation is secure and no further trouble is expected. Graz is the capital of the Austrian state of Styria, second largest city in Austria after Vienna. And I love Vienna, it's very beautiful. Shooting coincided with Matura exams, Austrian equivalent of final secondary school exams. The Austrian government will declare 3 days of national mourning, considered the deadliest in the country's modern history. Flags outside the Hofburg Plaza in Vienna have been lowered to half-mast. Mayor Carr called the incident a terrible tragedy. Vienna Mayor Michael Ludwig said he was shocked by the news. It's precisely in moments like these that we must stand together as a society. Hatred and violence must never prevail. Chancellor Christian Stocker called the attack a dark day in the history of Austria and a national tragedy that shakes us deeply. I happen to agree. I've never understood taking out violence or taking out your grievances in that manner. Somehow it just doesn't add up, and I don't like it. I think people are loopy. There's a lot of loopy people out there. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised by that. What else do we have? I saw a lot of news, even on the Russian side of the planet, just like on our side of the planet, that about the violence going on in LA. And there's another article that they're making sure to publish about Trump backing the potential arrest of the California governor. And this one has a video. And I heard JR earlier on his show. He had a good show today, and I liked it. And he was reading up on Greta Thunberg. I talked about her last night a little bit. And he was... he thought it was almost, I assume he thought it was as funny as I did. And isn't that nonsense? There's a couple of opinion pieces about that. And one of the ones that there are two articles that I read on this that just seem to follow where I'm not sure I want to keep going there. Hell, maybe they'll put me on that Mirotvorets list. There are several journalists on that list. It's nonsense. But there are two opinion pieces, both from June the 7th, that one is entitled, Kiev sends the living to die but will not accept its dead. And then there's another one called Ukrainian Shame, Why Kiev Refuses to Take Back Its Dead and Wounded. Isn't that interesting. I may read one of them, but I wanted to. There's a video out there that I watched by Sverbank, and Sberbank is the largest Russian. I think it's the largest Russian bank. If it's not the largest, it's among the largest. And Sberbank, it has an interesting story about AI, and it says our responsibility is to take AI in the right direction. And Sber First Deputy Chairman Alexander Vidyakin. And if you get a chance to read that, that's a pretty good article. You can watch it too, but it's only in English subtitles. You can find them, I think, on the bottom. But I listened to it. It was pretty interesting. There was but the most interesting one came out today, and here is an opinion piece. And I tell you what, this I'm starting to read a lot of this guy's opinion pieces. You have to go out and find them, just because he's interesting. On X, his name is at Tariq Cyril Amar, TARIKCYRILAMAR, and he's on Substack, and he's got a website, TariqCyrilamar.com, and all of his stuff is published out there too. And he is alleging that the new number one enemy of the Russians is not the U.S., it's Germany. And they probably won't, but Germans should pay close attention to recent news out of Russia. The Levada Polling Institute, long internationally acknowledged as a serious and dependable agency, has published the result of a recent survey which shows that Germany is now considered peak hostile by ordinary Russians. 55% of Russians name Germany as the country most unfriendly to Russians. 5 years ago, that figure was only 40%. And that's not small either, but two things stand out. First, the rapid increase in the unfavorability rating, and second, the fact that Berlin manages to take over the top position in this ranking. For 20 years, it was securely held by the U.S., which came in at a whopping 76% as recently as last year. But now, clearly responding to Trump's new and comparatively more rational course, only 40% of Russians see the U.S. as the most unfriendly state. So, to paraphrase an old Soviet motto, Berlin has caught up with and overtaken America. Isn't that nuts? But many Germans, especially in the political mainstream media and conformist expert, and they say that, expert is in Skopachkach in quotes, elites will either completely ignore or dismiss the shift. Others will be foolish enough to feel pleased. What better evidence of the new German superiority has left an impression? Not much. For a historian or anyone with a memory, the Levada finding should be alarming. To see why, consider a broader context. The thing about Germany is that sooner or later, the question of war or peace, at least in Europe, depends upon Germany, whether usually unoriginal ideas its elites get worked up about at any given time. Isn't that crazy? In any case, in 1945, after the Second World War caused by Berlin, everyone who mattered, not the Germans anymore at that point, seemed to understand that one large Germany can be, let's say, awkward for the rest of the world. Two seemed just about right, especially when both were under firm control from Washington and Moscow, respectively. The other thing generally accepted was that the old enmity between Germany and France had to be buried. A third crucial issue, however, not only was left unresolved but weaponized for Cold War purposes. If Germany had to finally play nice with the French and the other Western Europeans, the U.S. needed Germany to stay nasty toward Russia. Isn't that good? That makes sense. I don't know if that's correct, but it definitely makes sense. In effect, West Germany was retrained to heel toward the West, but kept baring its teeth toward the East. The polite term for this act of national house training in Western values and civilization is set under geopolitical hierarchy to be part of the long way west. Today, even wanting to talk to the Russians to convey anything other than ultimatums is called appeasement. Former representatives of normal engagement are either forced into humiliating public recant or ostracized, like the journalist Gabriel Krohn Smaltz. The worst sin in the new German catechism is to try to understand Russian. Literally, a Russlandversteher is a heretic almost worthy of the stake now. Such heretics are clearly in the way. That starts from the assumption that Germany and Russia must always be enemies, as current foreign minister recently stated in an unguarded and therefore honest moment. Consequently, the only policy that seems to be left to such hidebound minds is the buildup of the military and massive increases in armament spending. That such spending has already been practiced and has a miserable record of inefficiency in Europe does not matter. Neither will it, of course, to the arms industry or its shareholders. They'll like that part, definitely. So, and perish the thought that Germans could be smart enough to do both, modernize their military and at the same time engage in genuine talks and compromise, as well as renewed and mutually beneficial commerce with Russia. That pattern, not dumb appeasement after all, was the real signature style of the cheaply maligned Ostpolitik, which means Eastern politics. But it seems that this ability to walk and chew gum, as Berliner's former American idol Joe Biden would have said, has been lost, or worse, willfully abandoned. Wow. Isn't that crazy? And it goes on for another long time, but I think that's plenty to read there. There's another article about the French and the Brit and the Germans. Macron speaks, Merz contradicts, and the EU drifts into irrelevance. Did I just say irrelevance? Irrelevance. Jeez. Western Europe has lost the plot, but still continues to play with fire. I think the title speaks for itself. Does it not? I tell you what, there's some interesting things going on in this here world. Isn't it crazy? I tell you, part of me wants to go back to the AI topic. And I tell you what, has anybody watched any of these military channels that talk about? I think I'd like to show you one that that I watched that was pretty amazing. And where am I in the right spot here? I want to make sure that I get the right one for you because it was pretty interesting, and I want to copy it for you and talk about it because this was a very relevant post, and it's about, remember I told you last Thursday, or was it Sunday? I don't remember which one it was, and I'm stealing this from a place called Military TV on YouTube. And it is pretty unbelievable. So it's talking about the drone attack on the Kursk Bridge that occurred last week and how it was stopped and why it was stopped. And when you watch this and when you hear this, and more people in America need to hear this, if only so that we don't continue to pump all kinds of money into this kind of war. So remember, it might even be as long as 2 years ago now, that the Ukrainians managed to blow up the Kursk Bridge between mainland Russia and did I say Kursk Bridge? Damn it, Crimean Bridge. I really apologize. I'm talking about the Crimean Bridge, and it's mostly civilian, but you can also, there's obviously it's a mainland bridge, and so they like to bomb it and see if they can take care of it. And I talked to you last week, but there was only like a half a minute video of this Russian drone attack on this a seabound drone. And this was so freaking interesting. They're saying that these things are now armed with Sidewinder missiles for self-defense. And we're talking a boat drone. So I'm going to let you listen to this story. And again, I'm going to even quote where I got it. It's coming from a place called Military TV. It's called, I Bet You Didn't Hear This News. Watch how another U.S.-armed Ukrainian weapon was taken out by the Russians, of course. And if nothing else, it is definitely something we should be thinking about. And I hope you're interested, because it's a hell of a story.
Is proving that control of the sea no longer belongs solely to destroyers, submarines, or aircraft carriers. Instead, it's increasingly shaped by small, fast, unmanned platforms. Some of them no bigger than a small boat, yet
I'm here to tell you that this entire thing, in my view, was probably created by AI. Remember me telling you a while ago that you can go out, and I forget the services, but there are some very good services that allow you to go out and you can create videos, and people are doing it in AI. And you can go out and find all of these topics, accumulate them together, and create your own video. I pretty much guarantee you that is what this one is doing. Now, you got to edit your topics yourself, because if you don't, it'll definitely be twisted. But you can change the content, and you can even change just part of the content. So you can have it give you the entire story that you want to say. Give me a 10-minute video on blah, and it'll give you a 10-minute video. And I've done this several times, created a 10-minute video. I haven't done anything with them, but I've gone out and created some on various topics just to see how it works. And the AI twists it one way or the other. But this is definitely created by AI, but maybe it was created by AI in Russia. Who knows? But it's called Military TV. It's in English, and this is definitely an AI voice. I suppose I shouldn't say definitely, but I'm 90% certain it's an AI voice. So anyway, let's continue. It just started. This whole thing's only 8 minutes long, so I'm going to let it go probably for all of it.
Capable of incredible destruction. And we just witnessed a...
Am I getting... It's spinning. That's weird. Wonder why that would be. That's on the remote computer too. I wonder if I stop it and restart it, if it'll do it again. Son of a nutcracker, people. We're gonna try again and refresh that page and see what happens.
The war in Ukraine is proving that control of the sea no longer belongs solely to destroyers, submarines, or aircraft carriers. Instead, it's increasingly shaped by small, fast, unmanned platforms. Some of them no bigger than a small boat, yet capable of incredible destruction. And we just witnessed a bold example of that. Near the highly strategic Crimean Bridge, a Ukrainian sea drone armed with US-made Sidewinder missiles was destroyed mid-mission by a Russian Lancet kamikaze drone. So what does this incident tell us about the current balance of power in the Black Sea? Let's break it all down. On June 3, 2025, a significant engagement took place near the Crimean Bridge. Russian forces successfully targeted and destroyed a Ukrainian Magura 5-7C drone using a Lancet drone, a move that not only eliminated a valuable Ukrainian asset, but also sent a clear message about Russia's growing confidence in its drone warfare capabilities. The Magura 5-7 wasn't just another waterborne drone on a scouting mission. It was reportedly equipped with two AIM-9M Sidewinder missiles, sophisticated American air-to-air weapons that are typically launched from fighter jets. In this case, Ukraine had adapted them for sea-based platforms as part of a broader effort to develop defensive and offensive drone capabilities that could level the playing field against Russia's overwhelming firepower. The AIM-9M is a formidable missile. It homes in on heat signatures and is designed to track and destroy fast-moving aircraft. But in Ukraine's hands, it had been repurposed to defend naval drones against aerial threats, Russian helicopters, drones, or perhaps low-flying jets. The logic was simple: give unmanned boats the ability to fight back, to protect themselves while approaching high-value Russian targets like supply ships or bridges. But that innovation came at a cost, literally. Each AIM-9M missile is estimated to cost around $400,000. The Magura 5-7 platform itself costs more than $250,000. So when that single drone was destroyed, Ukraine didn't just lose a surveillance asset, it lost nearly $1 million in cutting-edge hardware, much of it supplied by the West. The footage of the strike, circulated by Russian state media, became more than just evidence of a successful interception. It became a propaganda tool, showcasing Russia's ability to neutralize NATO-supplied weapons and raise doubts about the survivability of Western tech on the battlefield. But what really makes this incident worth examining is how it was accomplished. And that takes us to the drone responsible for the takedown: the Lancet.
Now, the Lancet is Russia's primary drone, and I think he outlines the cost for them here. But you heard that he said that little platform with two Sidewinder missiles, allegedly for defense, and huge capacity of explosive to self-detonate when it hits the target, is a big deal. So if you can get to the bridge and blow it up, it only costs you $1 million to blow up the bridge. But if you lose it to a drone that doesn't cost much at all, like the Lancet, you're crying. That's $1 million. Every Sidewinder was 400,000 plus.
The Lancet drone isn't large, flashy, or particularly expensive. In fact, that's what makes it so dangerous. Developed by Russian firm Zala Aero, the Lancet is a loitering munition, often referred to as a kamikaze drone. Unlike traditional UAVs that return to base after their mission, the Lancet is built to destroy itself upon impact with the target. Once launched, it patrols an area, searching for enemies. What made the Lancet so effective in this case was a mix of smart design and the Magura's own limitations. The Lancet is equipped with both optical and infrared sensors, giving it solid targeting capabilities. It uses algorithms and real-time processing to adjust its trajectory mid-flight, allowing it to hit moving targets even in challenging environments like coastal waters. It's also built to resist jamming. Unlike some drones that rely heavily on satellite guidance, the Lancet includes inertial navigation systems, allowing it to operate even in zones with heavy electronic warfare activity.
That's the biggest point of them all, is being able to operate in jamming. I used to work on jammers. Collection and jammer was my, on the tactical side, I was a collection and jammer. And we had jammers that could knock radio stations off the air. We had some big ones in the military. And I can't imagine that in the last 30 years they haven't developed dramatically. Now, they're done simultaneously. So this Lancet drone has its own jammer built in, and it jams any of the others and keeps its own airways clear. And so it can also jam the technology of other people. It's a hell of a weapon. It's crazy.
There was another advantage, the Magura 5.7's targeting system. In order to fire its missiles, the Magura has to physically rotate its entire hull to aim horizontally. That mechanical limitation takes time, valuable seconds in a drone-on-drone engagement. While the Sidewinder missiles have excellent vertical tracking, around 60 to 67 degrees in field of view, they rely on the drone's own position to align horizontally with the target. So when the Lancet appeared, moving fast and low, the Magura likely had no time to react. Its targeting rotation wasn't fast enough to align a missile shot. In just moments, a Russian drone closed in and struck, wiping out a platform armed with weapons worth over 10 times its cost. To understand the full weight of this incident, we have to zoom out and consider where it happened. The Crimean Bridge. This structure isn't just a bridge. It's one of the most strategically important pieces of infrastructure in the entire Russia-Ukraine war. It connects mainland Russia to the Crimean Peninsula, acting as a vital supply route for military equipment, fuel, and personnel.
The bridge is 12 miles long.
For Ukraine, disrupting or destroying that bridge has long been a top priority. In late 2023, and again in early 2025, Ukrainian forces used Magura naval drones, including the V7 model, to attack the bridge. These strikes caused significant damage and forced Russia to divert resources into protecting the crossing. Ukraine had clearly shown that unmanned sea drones could inflict major strategic losses. Russia took the threat seriously. In response, it increased defenses around the bridge, deploying radar, patrol boats, and now drones like the Lancet to intercept incoming threats before they can get close. So, when Ukraine sent another Magura 5.7 toward the bridge, Russia was ready. The June 3rd strike wasn't an isolated victory. It was a part of a broader effort to lock down one of its most vulnerable and valuable assets. The Magura 5.7's destruction near the bridge symbolized more than just a failed mission. It showed that even the most advanced naval drones, equipped with heat-seeking missiles, stabilized gun turrets, thermal optics, satellite communications, and jamming countermeasures, are vulnerable. In this case, a cheap disposable kamikaze drone proved more effective than a state-of-the-art sea drone loaded with Western weaponry. That's a trend both sides, and the world, are watching closely. Drones are fighting drones, and every engagement adds a new layer to the evolving playbook of modern warfare. Thanks for watching. Until the next time.
Well, that was actually a very informative video, and I wanted to give that to you. Maybe you're not into war. I still have a little bit of military left in me. I have another article that I'm not going to get to because it's just too long, but I'm going to share it with you tomorrow night. It's a Sergei Lavrov, and it'll take me a little while to go through it all. So right now, we're going to talk about, remember me starting you out with the Belarusian new prime minister a while ago, and I never got to it. This guy's name is Maxim Rezhenkov, and he says that Ukraine. And I watched his appearance. He was with Sergei Lavrov when they started talking about what is, going on, and how he's the new minister for Belarus, and how they're going to start, and their two leaders, Lukashenko and Putin, have been friends for a long time, and they work together for a long time, and they really do well for each other and their respective countries. And so basically, Lavrov was saying to this new guy, whose name is again Maxim Rezhenkov, he wants to work together with him in especially in the area of Ukraine. Well, then the Belarusian foreign minister got to give his point of view on what they were discussing. And what he said was, Ukraine is not ready for peace. He criticized Kiev for refusing to accept the bodies of its own soldiers. I got to tell you, that is coming back to bite them in the rear end for not doing it, and doing it quickly, because it's just, to the rest of us in the world, that's just offensive. At least it is to me. I think it's offensive. If you don't treat your fallen with the utmost respect, these are people, whether they were forced to or not, is not the issue, but they gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country, whether they believed in it or not. And so, when I was serving in the Army, I had a contract, and I looked at it as a contract. And I remember actually putting thought into that contract. It wasn't just another document to sign when you sign on the dotted line. Maybe I'm obsessive, and maybe most kids that join the military don't consider this. But when I had signed up, I signed up for 4 years. And I knew that almost the first, in fact, it was more than a year and a half. For training, for me, I went to basic training that was 8-10 weeks. I don't remember. And but it's not longer than 3 months. So call it, even if you call it 2 months. Then I went to Defense Language Institute for a year. And then I went to training to learn what my job was, collection jamming, collecting radio traffic from Russia, or from foreign combatants on the battlefield. I was basically in a tactical scenario. I would be an interpreter of radio traffic. So I had to go to school for that. And that was pretty involved, because when you're in the language school, they don't necessarily give you enough to understand what's going on Russian radio. So there's no security clearance necessary for being at the Defense Language Institute learning Russian, but you got to have one if you're going to do your actual job. And so you get in there and you learn all of the interesting things about your job after that. And that's another 4 or 5 months. So no matter how you slice it, I'm 18 months into the Army before I'm even trained. And I only got 2.5 years left at that point. And so most people, if you get sent overseas, and I turned down an assignment in Germany, which I never should have, and they sent me instead to Fort Hood, Texas. But I had a job waiting for me in Germany, but in order to get it, you have to commit to going over there for at least 3 years. And I didn't have 3 left, and I felt like that was a scam. I was like, well, that's kind of a bait and switch, isn't it? Because they don't tell you that when you're sitting there in the recruiting station, that or maybe you don't ask it. But anyway, I reviewed that contract long and hard before I signed it, and I read it, and I understood that it meant if there was a war, if I agreed with it or not, I was on the hook to go and potentially die for my country. And so I would hope that if I did that, somebody would respect that and not just my family, but to think that if I'd have gotten killed in Europe in some idiot war that I probably didn't agree with, but which I signed a contract to be in for, that somebody would respect that if I did die. And here we got 6,000 bodies on a border that they're not accepting, and they say they're going to accept them sometime later. I haven't seen any news on that here. And, I don't know the current status. It doesn't appear to be any different than it was yesterday or the day before, that these bodies are waiting and Ukraine isn't repatriating them. But here, this Belarusian foreign minister, talked about that. And he continued. Following last week's bilateral talks in Istanbul, Moscow said it would return the bodies of 6,000 soldiers in a unilateral humanitarian gesture. On Saturday, it tried to transfer the first batch 1,212 bodies to the Ukrainian side, but the latter did not show up at the exchange point, claiming that they hadn't agreed on the date of the transfer. Speaking on the news channel Russia 24 on Tuesday, Rezhenkov claimed that this behavior suggested that Ukraine isn't actually ready for peace because it is not politically or economically beneficial for Kiev. Isn't that sad? And here's a quote. Of course, it may be politically disadvantageous for you to pay money, admit that there are 6,000 dead people, and so on. But what about the relatives? What about loved ones? That's what I say, Rezhenkov said. Kiev promises the equivalent of $367,000 in compensation to the families of fallen soldiers, although many have reportedly endured long waits and a slew of bureaucratic hurdles to get that money. That's where they're coming up with the $2 billion price tag to take the bodies. And that's why Ukraine doesn't want to do it. And if that article is true about having another 40,000 from Kursk that died in Kursk, that's a huge amount of money, and they don't have it. Then he said, I'll be frank, it's disgusting for them not to take back the bodies. Russia has demonstrated its willingness to seek peace, said Rezhenkov, saying that Moscow's proposals to exchange prisoner of wars and the remains of the soldiers. The minister suggested that Ukrainians are driven to negotiation with Moscow by the West, which they don't really want, purely for tactical reasons, to test the Russian side for its ability to act, whether or not they are ready for peace, how they will behave, what if they are, on the contrary, interested in continuing the conflict. That's what many believe, by the way, including me. Rezhenkov added that Kiev's Western backers, who are the main instigators of carnage, want the hostilities to go on and are trying to weaken Russia at the hands of the Ukrainians. The West doesn't feel sorry for Ukraine and doesn't feel sorry for Ukrainians either. How can you not agree with that at this point? Following the interview on Russian 24, Rezhenkov held a meeting with Lavrov where the two discussed strengthening strategic partnership between Russia and Belarus. And that's the end of that story. I hope you enjoyed the show. Come back and listen tomorrow night. I'll be here at 9 o'clock. As usual, you can listen to all past podcasts at internationalflavor.com. And I hope that you do. And you can also listen to them at damradio.com/podcast. And to listen live, you can listen to great music at any time, listening to damradio.com/live. It's great music content, and I very much like it. So I appreciate you all being here. And I'm not sure. There's plenty to talk about. And tomorrow I do want to tell you about that that other video that I have for you that has to do with Elon Musk. So I forget, somebody tell me about it because it is quite interesting. And it's a discussion about Elon by people in the East. So there you have it. Please join me tomorrow. And I very much look forward to having you. Have a good night, all.